Today we're going to be talking about the second part of the Protestant Reformation. So Martin Luther wasn't the only person to lead a religious revolt against the Catholic Church. Another person who did that was a Dominican Catholic priest named Ulrich Zwingli. And he set up his religious movement in the country of Switzerland. So Zwingli felt that the Catholic Church was too formal, focused way too much on paintings and relics, and not enough on the actual religious purpose behind Jesus. So when he took power, he went into churches and he removed paintings, relics, and any decorations. Later on, he abolished the Catholic Mass, and he allied himself with Martin Luther because once Martin Luther's movement had gone more political, he saw a lot of things in common with Luther and Zwingli. Ultimately, though, Zwingli kind of rubbed people the wrong way, and some of the changes that he made in society in Switzerland weren't very popular, so he was killed by some Catholics who disagreed with him in a battle, and then his body was taken, chopped up, and later burned. Next to Martin Luther, John Calvin is probably one of the most famous people associated with the Protestant Reformation. John Calvin was a French priest, also another Catholic priest, who fled to Switzerland, like Zwingli, when he broke from the Catholic Church. One of the things that's important about Calvin's belief is this idea of predestination. Now, predestination states that is the belief that your fate is already decided by God. God knows whether you're going to go to heaven or hell, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Now, Catholics believe that God is omniscient, meaning all-knowing, but that doesn't change the fact that Catholics believe that human beings have free will. What John Calvin's followers believed was that God basically knew what was going to happen, so it didn't really matter if you had free will or not, because you were going to act exactly how God had intended you to. So that's really one of the major differences between Catholicism and the followers of John Calvin, is that predestination is the lack of free will. Calvin was also pretty interested in reforming society, so he punished dancing, singing of obscene songs, swearing, and playing cards and gambling. And another famous person in this Protestant Reformation is King Henry VIII. Now, King Henry VIII, his Reformation was actually political in nature. Religion got tied into it, but like we saw with Martin Luther, when you start to mix power and politics and religion, they all kind of get pulled into the same thing. So the issue with King Henry VIII was that he needed a male heir to take over the throne after he died. He had had a number of daughters, and he therefore wanted a divorce because he blamed his wife for not being able to conceive a male child. Scientifically, we now know that it was actually his fault that he couldn't have a male child. So he asked Parliament to break with the church completely. Now, why was this? Because when he first requested the divorce or the annulment, the Pope said, no, you aren't getting the annulment, you don't deserve it, you don't qualify for it. So the king, being the king and being used to getting his way, he decided simply to break away. So he asked Parliament to dissolve and break away from the Catholic Church. They, of course, agreed, and King Henry VIII declares himself the head of the brand new Church of England. Now, some people were actually pretty critical of this. In fact, a very famous person who we learned about previously, Thomas More, actually was very close to King Henry VIII, and time again asked King Henry to change his mind, to go back to the Catholic Church, and Finally, because of all this disagreeing with King Henry VIII, King Henry VIII, despite their friendship, actually had him executed at the Tower of London. One of the things that King Henry VIII did to take away the power of the Catholic Church once he split from it was he went to all the churches, cathedrals, and monasteries, and he took their land and he claimed it for England himself. Remember, land is very powerful because land equals money and power and also influence. So by taking away their land, you essentially take away any power within the Catholic Church. And really, to this very day, the monarch is the head of the Church of England. Now, currently, that's Queen Elizabeth II. That's really the Queen's only real role in government, is that she is in charge of the Church of England. She has no real political power anymore. And finally, we see just kind of a list. King Henry actually had, when he was all said and done, he had 6 wives. The first one, Catherine of Aragon, was the one he divorced. That's what started this whole situation off. Then he actually had a number of wives who were beheaded. And then finally, his last wife, Catherine Parr, actually outlived him, so she did survive. Hopefully, you learned a little bit more about some of the other famous figures in the Protestant Reformation.